All right, guys. So what do we got cooking today? We got Parker McLachlin, the short game chef. And we're going to sit down and talk about where's good golf live? How do wedges match up to our technique? Will one wedge work better than another? He's out there helping guys on the PGA Tour shave strokes off their game. And he's one himself. Guys, sit back, relax, stay tuned.
Money, perfect.
All right, guys. Well, welcome back to another episode. I'm Chad with Foreward Golf, and today we have a special guest today. Today we have Parker McLachlin, the short game chef. And I'm excited to have him here on the show because, as you guys might well know, I can drive the ball all right. I can hit my irons all right. But when I get around the greens, it does get a little dicey. So sit back, relax, stay tuned. This episode's going to be great. Chef, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I do appreciate it.
Let's go, man. Let's have a good convo about it.
Absolutely. So guys, you know damn well we are trying to figure out where good golf lives. And we were touching on this a little earlier, and you are a much more accomplished golfer than I, but having a diverse portfolio, understanding where you're weak, where you're strong, to be a good or great player, you have to have a pretty diversified portfolio. Would you pretty much agree to that?
Yeah, but you know, the hard part about it is that you'll see great drivers of the golf ball, like a Dustin Johnson. You're just like, man, this guy drives it 330, dead straight. What held him back before he won majors? It was his wedge game. So it's hard to blend being a great driver, a great iron player, and a great wedger of it, because there's different aspects that, like, okay, if you're going to create speed and use the ground and rotation and all that kind of stuff, use some leverage, like, you're going to drive it great. But then we need to remove all that speed. If you're going to be a great wedger from 20 to 50 yards, we need to remove all that speed, yet still be able to get you that spin that you need to stop it on the green. So two very different things that require a different sort of almost skill set. So I would compartmentalize: driving is one skill, iron play is another skill, wedging it's another skill.
I would totally agree with that. Now, some of the shortcuts, maybe it's not a shortcut, but the strategies I've tried to use is I play with a very strong grip. I think that's why I hit the ball good. I think that's why I lean the shaft. I've tried to weaken my grip severely around the greens, but inherently, like anything, it takes a lot of practice because it's kind of changing your release pattern a little bit. And the thing that I feel like I struggle with the most, and I know you haven't seen me chip a ball, but it's not releasing the club, but it's almost standing up and making room for that release, because I get down and I stay down. So I could weaken the grip, I can get the face more open, but if I don't stand up at the right time, my low point, I start chunking it probably even more.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's a lot of good chippers that have been super strong, lead hand grip. Also, like guys like Paul Azinger come to mind. There's been guys that have been like Jose Maria Olazabal that are super weak lead hand grip. So it, one way or the other, doesn't really matter. But it has a lot to do with, how you're releasing it. But I think it's more setup and backswing than necessarily how you're actually like releasing it on the way through. The release part of it should come naturally based on what you do at setup and backswing. So if you do all sorts of things, let's say to create a bunch of ball speed in your backswing, you're going to do something to try to unload all that ball speed that you've created. There's going to be some type of compensations being made versus a player that maybe gets themselves in a better setup spot, has a backswing that doesn't necessarily create a bunch of ball speed, but then on the way through, they're like, well, I can be as aggressive as I want to be, and I know I'm not going to hit it too far. I think that's usually the psychology that I see is players, especially like good players like yourself, that compress it, hit good iron shots, hit good drives. You come to wedging it from 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 yards, and it's like, well, the same principles don't apply. So if you start to get in there and get down and then try to shaft lean and like drive this thing and like really pinch it and clip it, the ball's going to come out too fast.
Yeah, it comes out too hot.
And then you bail on it. Like, you're going to be like, well, that one came out 15 feet too far. What are you going to do on the next shot? Let me bail on it. Try to, return that shaft and try to add loft right at impact. And it's like, it just becomes like you're just chasing your tail,
Yeah, I can almost feel like I'm not going to pull off the shot before I even pull the trigger back. And it could be just the way I do really load into my right side in my full swing. And it's like, you get a little bit of that. It's like you're saying, and I kind of know this to a degree. I just don't know how to fix it. It's like, how you build a backswing and how you set up, there's a subconscious response from that. So if you're like, Chad, you're taking your club back way too far. Of course you're decelling on it and doing all these things. And you're like, only take it back to here, which is hard in itself. I mean, you tell me to take it back to here, it feels like you're only taking it back this far. You're like, I don't think I can hit it from there. You're like, well, do it anyway. But if you can get me to do what you want, it does kind of free you up because it changes that pattern of that response you may or may not have.
Exactly right. And I think, and there's a proper way to take it back to that far. So it's like, I always tell my players, I'm like, a lot of guys will take it too far. So the club head will be up here. And I'm like, okay, let's start with getting the club head here. But what we're going to do is we're going to actually move way more with our body on the way back and not let the club then stand straight up with our arms and our hands. So you're actually pivoting more, but the club head is not traveling as far.
Makes sense.
And so once you get to that spot, you're like, okay, well, from here, I feel like if I'm trying to hit it 15 or 20 yards, I gotta move as fast as I can. And that movement is gonna shift your pressure forward. It's gonna help keep you on top of the ground, stay shallow, right, and then give you some speed through the shot, which is gonna give you access to more spin, right? So, but you gotta be able to set yourself up to be able to move through it in a fast manner. Like I don't want people to slow down in any short game shot, really. Like you always wanna be having speed, especially like right through impact. Like doesn't matter how slow you swing. You give me a little bit of speed right through impact. Like if we're going to talk about that, like Justin Thomas would be one where it's like, he has that sort of lazy swing, but it's like, there's speed right here.
Right.
Like, whew, he gives it that little bit extra and then you can see that ball grab, even though it looks like he just made a slow motion swing.
Right. So would you say that for like more of an average player, like maybe not on the PGA Tour, but a guy is typically going to swing it back a little too far? Is that a big common thing that you see, or do you see guys taking it back too short and having to over accelerate?
No, that's more on the rare side. I think the guys that take it back too far, too much wrist, too much arms, not enough like pivot with their body. It's just sort of like arms and hands just go up and that club just goes straight up. And they're real timid to like move their body on the way back for 10, 15, 20, 30 yard shot. Right. It just becomes arms and hands. And so I usually get my players to really start engaging the body a bit more, and then the arms and hands will kind of follow the body's lead.
So, because I have I would consider bad short game, and I am a club fitter, one of the things that all club people will try to do to maybe not address the issue completely is to fish around with multiple different wedges saying, can anything bail me out even just a little bit? In your experience, if the technique is, let's call it too far gone, what are the chances of you rolling up and trying a high bounce or low bounce? If your technique isn't there, are you ever going to be able to experience what a true wedge fitting might be when you're looking at things like sole design and stuff like that?
Man, that's a good question. It's like, what comes first, the chicken or the egg, right?
It is the ultimate question, actually.
I would say I've had some really good players that have come to me with like 4-degree bounce wedges, and they're just like, I'm hitting these like high moon balls when I'm trying to hit it a little bit more mid-flighted. So they're hitting these like little moon balls with no spin. And I was like, let's just try something like we've worked on some technique stuff, but let's just try something a little bit different. So I'll give him like a 14-degree bounce wedge. The shots just all of a sudden come out like this.
Yeah.
Like that didn't change technique from the one to the next shot. Right. And the flight, the spin, everything just completely changes. So there are some sole designs that can potentially really help a player out and get them in that spot of like, what I find is usually like if a player is too steep, right? But he loves to see like that low bounce sitting there, like face open, like, oh man, it looks so good. Like, you can't see any of the leading edge. It's just sitting flush on the turf. It's like, all right, you're hitting moon balls every single time. You're not getting any spin. This thing's just like digging too much.
Right.
So you give them like a 14-degree bounce, and now all of a sudden it's like that back edge stays up on top of the ground because they're hitting the ground before the golf ball. And so that club stays up, and now they're hitting grooves one, two, three, and that it shoots it much lower off the initial launch angle. And so to me, it's definitely worthwhile to going, if you're not seeing the right results with your wedge, try a variety of wedges with a variety of soles, and you will see one is going to come out really nice. And if you can't find one, then it's time to change that technique.
Right. Well, that's the way when we've built out this iron process. And if we do get to the wedge process, we're working on it. It's exactly that, is we're trying to test the high, the medium, and the low. If nothing happens, if everything's 8 grooves high and they're all floaters with no spin on them, it's like, all right, you clearly need a lesson because we just tried 3 crazy different soles. We should have seen a result, but we didn't. You're going to get a lot of guys to go through that and go, all right, fine, I'll do the lessons. And the reason why they're going to do it is because you proved to them that there was no other way to do it. If you don't do that, then they might not, they'll just bail on it and go try something else. So what you're talking about is kind of what we've noticed too about the Tiger Strike is before we cut a guy open and do surgery, I'm looking for a more holistic approach. Because regardless of how good or bad their swing is, most people do repeat what they do fairly well. At least that's what I've noticed on the mat. If a guy's out to in 4 degrees, he'll probably be out to in 4 degrees most times. If he's 6 degrees down, he'll be around 6 degrees down. So I'm like, okay, is that exactly how I want him to swing? Maybe not. But what can I put into his hand that might get that strike compromised? Yeah. I mean,
optimize that swing, right?
Absolutely. Well, I learned this, it's so funny we're on this table, in a bowling alley. I started bowling with these pro bowlers, and it's like the guy who can repeat their action is actually the best bowler. Doesn't matter how fast he throws it, doesn't matter how much it curves. If he's lined up and he knows where to throw it, and he's got the right ball, you can't beat the guy. And it's almost the same thing. It's like, hey, dude, keep that path at 4, keep your angle of attack at 6. Here's a club that basically produces this flight. Like, let's go out on the golf course, pick some targets, and see if you can execute those shots. Because if you can, you're going to be a much better golfer than you ever thought you could be.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, I mean, I think the guys at Vokey have so many different wedge options. It's crazy. And it's so fun to try all the different ones. And like, I just put a green in my backyard and there's I have all kinds of teeing areas. And so I can hit like up to about 30 yards. And so I'm on this like super tight and I had a handful of wedges just this morning. And I'm like, one would come out just like super sweet, low spin. The next one, I'd make the exact same swing. Boom, comes out like that. And I'm like, maybe this doesn't have enough bounce for me.
Yeah, you start to wonder.
I start wondering. I'm like, there's definitely something to like how this club is entering. And obviously like Matt's going to be a little bit different than the grass, but the concept is still the same. It's like how the club is entering the turf before the golf ball, keeping it above it, letting it go below it, whatever it might be, dictates and influences how it hits the golf ball. And then that influences how much spin and the launch angle and all that stuff. It's wild. I mean, Ping did a study where they found that almost 90% of partial wedge shots, you're hitting the ground before the golf ball. You're hitting ground
first. I seen that study. I found that to be very interesting.
Crazy, right?
Yeah, it is.
And so it's like, if it just goes back to then the thought of like, well, you better have the right wedge with the right amount of bounce and the right amount of like sole interaction for your type of delivery.
Absolutely.
Or else you're playing with a deck that's not full.
Totally. And I mean, you're still going to work on your technique. It's not going to be the end all fix all, but it's saying, dude, you've got the chips stacked in your favor. The golf is hard. So any little edge that we can get that makes sense, that is actually accurate, these are the type of things that Forward Golf is after. Is I don't want to sell people wedges, but I'm very interested in getting one into their hand if I know that it's right. And I agree with you. I mean, when you look at the Titleist lineup, it's very robust. I mean, they have more sole designs than any other company. I tend to like the K grind quite a bit with that long sole.
And I go with the lower bounce.
Yeah. So in my mind, I've always thought wide and low bounce makes some sense. It's kind of like a snowshoe where it can't really get in there, but it's still going to want to slide. One thing I've noticed is if you tend to play Vokeys growing up, you almost can't get a guy out of them. Like it's almost like once a Vokey player, always a Vokey player. And speaking of that, and I never had one with the flight lines on there, but you're responsible for putting flight lines on those Vokey wedges.
Yeah, that was a COVID idea, man. I was sitting out back. Excuse me. I was sitting out back. I've been working with Kevin Streelman and a couple of other like sort of mini tour players at the time, and Streelman had introduced me to like a handful of guys at Whisper Rock that were like struggling, amateur golfers just struggling with their short game. And I was like really struggling, like guys that had the yips, and there was just like, okay, so I'm watching how they're setting up to it. I'm watching how Streelman and other tour players are setting up to it. I'm like, there's a huge divide there, right? These guys, the amateur golfers are like ball off the back foot, hands way forward, weight way forward, club face is too shut. And I'm like, that might be a reason why you can't hit a 10-yard chip. And so then I was like, there's got to be something where like I can help them like line up to a pitch shot, a bump and run, and a flop shot or bunker shot with just something with shaft positioning awareness and club face awareness. And so that's sort of like what kind of went through my head. And I was like, yeah, I pitched it to the guys at Vokey, and they're like, I'll remember Voke was like, man, this is a neat training aid, he called it. And I was like, man, Titleist doesn't do training aids, right? That was his first year. He's like, this is a cool training. I was like, Titleist doesn't do training aids. And the more we talked, I said, Voke, where would you want a club face for a bunker shot? And where would you want the shaft position? He's like, club face is going to be, 30 to 40 degrees open. The shaft's going to be fairly neutral. I was like, I've got a line right there. It matches right up to that. I was like, what about a pitch shot? He's like, maybe like a degree of shaft lean forward, fairly square face. I was like, I got a line right there too. And I was like, what about a bump and run? He's like, I've actually measured a bump and run. I was like, well, how much shaft lean? He's like, my guys are between like 5 and 7 degrees of shaft lean forward for a bump and run. I was like, I've got a line at 6 degrees. He's like, okay, this is not a training aid. This is like a performance tool.
That's so cool.
And it was like, to me, I was like, whoa, this is crazy, right? So it just gives you the awareness of club face and shaft positioning. And then it's like, you can be creative off of that. You can make long swings, short swings, whatever you want to make, but at least you get the awareness of like, this is where a tour player is for those 3 different shots.
There's just nothing wrong with creating a baseline. Creating a baseline that you just can't get too far out of jurisdiction is going to move the game forward. I mean, if those people are using it properly and getting it, but that's such a cool story, dude, because those are the type of ideas that I think this game needs to continue to move in the direction that we want it to move. That's super innovative. And it's cool that your relationship with Titleist is so good that they were willing to listen to the idea. I mean, when companies get so big, it's kind of hard to get your voice heard. It was hard. It took a long time, and but they've been an unbelievable partner for my whole playing career. And then when I was like, well, I'm going to bring this idea to them first. I brought it to them, and they were like, okay, don't go talk to other companies. Like, we like this idea. And so, yeah, it's been cool to kind of help, build it. And now we're going to hopefully, now all of a sudden it's like, hey, we're going to put it on in all the different colors, not just white and black. So you can get it in gold and red and baby blue, whatever color you want. So they're like, okay, you can kind of spice it up, but it's still a performance tool. Yeah. Yeah, that is. I love it. I love that story because that's kind of very similar to how the iron process that we created at Foreward Golf was. It was just this idea, and then the idea sounded a little bit better, and pretty soon you're off and trying to run with it. So I know that you have your own kind of membership program for Short Game. What is the web? Is it shortgamechef.com or what is the website?
Shortgamechef.com, and there's an app that's associated with it. You can get all the videos there. I mean, we've got over 300 plus videos, and I walk people through on the instruction side. I walk people through step by step how to hit a bump and run, how to hit a pitch shot, how to hit a flop shot, how to get out of the bunkers, how to cure your chipping yips, how to putt, green side rough, all that kind of stuff. How to prep for tournaments. And then we've also got a section on there where I've got these sort of interviews, so to speak, or just conversations with tour players, guys like Lee Trevino, Keith Mitchell, Matt Kuchar, where they share their sort of secret recipes on how they hit certain shots. So it's super fun. I mean, it's a lot of like great, it's a great window into what these guys are thinking, feeling, because they, being with me, they're like, well, this is not a reporter. This is like a peer of mine. So they can go a little bit deeper and they open up a little bit more, and they're like, well, this is kind of how I hit this shot, and this is what I'm looking for with it. And these are my checkpoints with it, and this is what I do setup and backswing wise.
Well, it's cool. It's like almost like going like inside the ropes a little bit, hearing what Lee Trevino has to say if the ball's laying a certain way, and he goes, oh, I'm going to approach this shot like this because X, Y, and Z. And even myself, I'm like, what did he say? Why did he say it? I'm going to go try to like recreate the line and go, what's he even talking about? Because that's one of the things that these guys are so good at is like lie recognition. Like
1,000,000%.
I play with guys who are much better than me, and there are times they're in the rough, they're talking amongst each other, and I'm over there like, again, I want to be the best club fitter in the world, so I want to hear what's going on. And it's like, dog, I don't look at my shot like that when I'm in the rough. Oh yeah, the grass is behind it, so it's going to come out like this, so I got to play it like this. So, and then as you even move up the ranks, it's like, Patrick Reed probably looks at a chip shot and goes, well, what do you want me to do? Like, if I had to do it like this, I would do it like this. And then they got all these specifications on their wedge because they need to lay it 8 different ways. Talk to me a little bit about that, about lie recognition. And, I've heard from your buddies over there that your short game's always been pretty nasty.
Yep.
Get up and down from anywhere. And obviously you're not going to be able to do that without recognizing the lie. Now, I would imagine you're just going to tell me you just spent a lot of time with a wedge and put it in different situations, just studied what it is, but I'll leave that to you.
I mean, that's definitely part of it. I just think some of the greats, like I've been around Paul Azinger and Lee Trevino would be the 2 examples that I'll use as far as like really getting to spend a lot of time with them and listening and asking questions. And these guys, there's definitely some golf genius there with both of those guys where they would be able to see a lie and in their head say like, okay, this lie is telling me it wants to come out fast. So to offset this ball coming out fast, this is how I'm going to change my release pattern to make sure that it comes off slow. But there's so much grass behind it that I need to do this to then get the club in here so it doesn't just get super muffled. Mm-hmm. So as I'm doing this, I need to feel like I'm doing this, and I'm going to set my weight in this position. And you're just like, oh my, how did you get to that? And these guys are like, yeah, millions of hours of doing it, but it's like the cataloging in the brain of like that's the part where I'm like, man, every shot that they hit, they would catalog of like, that technique worked here and this is why. That technique didn't work here and this is what I might need to change or try on the next one. So to me, it's like these guys are just like next level, but they're next level and like they try, but then they
never forget.
They spend enough time to be like, boom, hit the shot, success, fail, how can I do? And then they don't just grab the next ball and like, it's like, no, they're like, okay, this didn't work there. That did work there. Let me try this now. And it's literally like a system and a process of how they go through to be like, this doesn't work in this situation and this does work.
Right. Yeah, dude. So those are the conversations I think most people want to hear. So if that's on the membership site, some behind the scenes stuff, I mean, you've already got my attention. I'm gonna have to get on that thing and take a look. I have seen some of the YouTube videos that you did with Lee, and I mean, he's my favorite golfer ever. Mostly for his iron play, but I mean, no one wedges it like that guy.
So good.
And the way you were talking about earlier, he had that video of saying, you turn the trunk, and that was basically when you were breaking that down. Is exactly what I thought of.
Well, and I'm sitting there, we're mic'd up and he's hitting some shots and he's hitting the nastiest, like 30, 40 yard spinners. And I'm like, this guy's still got it at 85 years old.
Amazing.
Unbelievable. Like he's still getting this ball to just like grab. Still understands how to deliver the speed in the right spot.
Have you ever messed with like shaft flex when it comes into wedges? So we've talked a little bit about the sole, but there's obviously other variables. The lie angle is one. Do you know what your lie angle tends to be, or do you like it a little bit more upright, a little flatter?
I like it a little bit on the flatter side. Okay. Yeah, I like it a little on the flatter side. I think that it doesn't flex quite as much with some of my wedges, right?
Yeah, toe droop.
Droop or whatever. Droop. Yeah, I don't know the term, but it doesn't do that quite as much with the wedges. So I have mine a little bit on the flat side, not much. I don't know a ton about the whole wedge stuff. I remember being on the back of the range with Rocco at TPC Scottsdale, and he's like, man, I'm playing around. I grabbed my 6-iron shaft. I cut it down just a little bit, and I put that in my wedge, and I kind of want to see what it feels like. And he's like, it kind of feels pretty good. Like, so, I mean, it really, I don't know enough about it to like really be able to give you like a good answer on it. But for the most part, what I typically see and what the guys at Titleist have told me is that you sort of want to just have one step / lighter / weaker, softer, whatever.
It makes sense. It makes sense. But then you go about how soft. I mean, you look at 172 yard 7-iron swing, and then you look at a 30-yard pitch shot, and you're like, well, There's no way that shaft's getting loaded up the same. So again, a lot of people are like, should I play the same shaft? It's like, I mean, it does sound consistent, but I don't know. Maybe it sounds good. Or then do something like what Rocco's talking. A lot of these guys get an 8-iron shaft out of the set and put it in there. But it's kind of like, in my head, I'm like, okay, well, if soft is better, let's go softer.
Yeah. But you still have to hit a full shot with some of the wedges. That's the hard part. It's like, you got to hit a 95%, 56 or 60 degree to get it to go your number from the middle of the fairway. But then you also need to be able to have the softness to be like, I need to hit a softy, floaty pitch shot over this bunker.
Correct.
And you need to have the shaft work well in both situations. I think that's a hard thing to really achieve.
You almost would have to have a club specialized for one thing and not let it really get out of its jurisdiction. So I know on the PGA Tour, when the greens get really firm, there's probably guys hitting full 60 degrees because the course conditions call for it. But at my local track where it's a lot softer, I kind of tell people like, dude, I don't know if you need to swing your 60 that hard. You could kind of come in at it, swing a little softer, flight it down. The ball's going to stop. But you're right. On the PGA Tour, there are a lot of full shots that still had to be had. So if you go too soft, now you've got this other conflicting thing that I don't think a lot of people are necessarily accounting for. So that's actually
I think there's some progression, I think, that can be made when it comes to wedge shafts. Like I think there's definite room for growth there. Somebody's going to come up with something cool at some point that's going to be like, dude, this is the greatest wedge shaft of all time. But I don't think it's been there. It hasn't. I don't think people have paid that much attention to it just yet.
And that's where, I think a lot of, like, when I wake up in the morning, I get excited about the day because it's like, I feel like there is opportunity in golf that hasn't been done yet when it comes to this equipment and shit, and probably a lot of the stuff. And just to be able to maybe crack the code on one little thing and put your one little mark on the game where, hey, this guy came up with this thing and people got better for it. It's like,
I mean, look at lab putters. I mean, they've exploded in the last couple of years, and it's like, they didn't exist not that long ago. Now all of a sudden, Lucas Glover goes and wins a couple times, and the things.
I just putted with one the other day. I mean, I got to admit, like, I putted the ball great. I mean, putting is about hitting your start line, managing your speed, and I did it very well. I felt like I could aim that DF3 fairly well. There is something to be said. Yeah, why the toe hang and all these other things, face balanced, and all of a sudden this torque free thing comes in. Not to say that everybody needs it, because I'm sure that they don't. But I know that there's a lot of people that do. I happen to really do well with center shaft. I think it's because I'm left eye dominant and I aim them fairly well. So a lab putter is a good fit for me. But
I'll give you a quick little story. Is that I was out at Napa with one of my guys, Keith Mitchell, and he just switched out from, he was playing a spider putter for the last handful of years, right? And he says, all my clubs have toe hang, driver, 3-wood, irons, every one of them, wedges, they all hang down. They all have toe hang. It's like, why am I using a face balanced putter? It's completely opposite of everything I do. So he went to a toe hang putter and he finished second at Sanderson like a few weeks later. And it was like, it's just interesting to see, like, he's like, I want to be consistent throughout my bag. Now, if he went to a completely torque free putter, he may lose complete feel of that. I don't, you never really know until you try.
Right.
But he might lose complete feel of like how it's flexing and the torque that he's having to hold off, right?
It could be beneficial, especially if you're pre-wired, do it with all your other clubs. I think that's a great point. And that's what's crazy is you got a guy like Keith Mitchell. I mean, one of the best players in the world. And they lose sleep thinking about these small little tiny details. Like, why is my face butter palette? Because he needed to make like one or two more putts. He would have won the damn thing or whatever the case may be. Everyone's walking on such a fine line. And I think that even if you're not on the PGA Tour, golf just does something weird to you where you just want a little bit more. It's not going to be easy and people are looking for a way. And what I'm trying to do is give them strokes gained on the money spent. Like, if I don't see strokes gained, dude, I don't want you to buy it from me, dude. Like, we can figure out go play Pebble Beach. That would be really fun. You don't need to buy these wedges for no reason. But if we see validity in what we're doing or what instruction they're getting and it's making them better, it's like, yeah, we want you to continue this package. We think you should invest into your game. And that's really the meat and potatoes of what we do and why I wanted to bring you on the show. I want people to know, that there are people who specialize in a very focused piece of this puzzle. And I think it's good that golf's going that way. I mean, remember when I was growing up, there wasn't really specialists, at least around my area. There was like the golf coach, and he did the drive, he did the putter, he did everything. And as golf has really pushed itself and the competitions got so gnarly, it's like now all of a sudden it's like you got these guys like George Gankis who are like swing technicians. They're breaking down all these little things. And then you got guys over here say, hey, man, you want to learn how to putt? I got some really cool shit because that's all I focused on for 10 years. And then you got guys like you. It's like, dude, I excel at 100 yards and in. Like, I almost want to like build this team where it's like this entity brings players in who want to abide by the rules that we set out and say, look, we're here to win races. If you guys think you could drive the car fast enough, we'll give you the fastest car. Mm-hmm. And let's go like win together as a team. And I know it happens a little bit, they have the tour trucks out there, but really creating a structure to where it's like, just like the Olympic people, the Olympians, right? They have a brick and mortar system. They're saying, look, this is what we're doing this year. If we don't win, and we're going to figure it out, and next year we're going to structure it a little different. Yep. I like that approach. And I think that there's enough experts out there in their fields to where if everything comes together, it's like, dude, we could build some really good players.
I'll give you this as an example. Matthew Pavon, who the top French golfer in the world.
I watched him in the U.S. Open. Dude, six swing.
Final round was in the final group with Bryson. Great golf swing, unbelievable player, 25th in the world. So about a month ago, he calls me and he says, hey, he's like, I've seen your stuff and came highly recommended. Can we work on some shots out of the thick rough? And I was like, that's it. He's like, yeah, really specific. I struggled out of the thick rough last year. Now he chips cross-handed, has for 12 years. So out of the fairway lies, cross-handed is money. Out of the rough, the cross-handed it just grabs too much grass on the way in. He stays too shallow. So we got together. He's like, hey, can you come to France and be at the French Open? I was like, yeah, we can do that. So we go over there and he's like, look, he's like, I'm into investing in myself. I want to see how good I can become. I want to invest in myself. And you're the 11th guy on my team, from sports psychologist to putting coach to swing coach to short game guy to physical trainer, social media manager. Like, everybody has a job, right? And it's like, he's the CEO, but everybody has a job around him. And I think it's like unbelievably cool that he is just like, I'm going all in on myself. And it's like, dude, that's and I think he's got a good filter to be able to take all of these different sort of inputs and everyone stays in their own lane, and he's got sort of guardrails for everybody, but we're all in a group chat and it's a, obviously like the amateur golfer is not going to be able to have the resources to go and do that. Right. But can you be disciplined enough to be like, my methodology matches up to George Gankis. I'm just going to stay focused on George's stuff on YouTube, on Instagram, on his website. I match up really well with Parker on short game. I'm going to really stick with his stuff. And like, this is a good matchup for me. Yep. Can you be disciplined enough to do that? You don't have to hire all of us, but it's like, there's plenty of free stuff out there for us to be like, George, Parker, Derek Ueda, putting coach. Now all of a sudden you're like, okay, this is kind of my team. Okay, who's my workout guy? Boom, you got that guy. So now you've got all these guys in place, and it's like the hard part is to stay disciplined because there's so much out there. You'd be like, well, George says this, but then I look a second later and Dana Dahlquist is saying something opposite. Yep. But it might be for two people that have opposite. Like Lee Trevino the other day is like, hey, you want to like smash the golf ball into the ground to make it go up. Well, not necessarily, but for that guy that he was talking to, that's what he was saying. He's like, no, you're going this way. You need to hit down on it to make this thing go up. Don't hit up on it. So it's like, if you can stay disciplined with it, you can find the right people to listen to that work well with sort of your DNA of how you move the club, how you grip the club, all that stuff. I would say you can build your own team.
I agree. And I think when I look back at, me trying to get better before I even started this business, I mean, that's what I was doing. I was on YouTube listening to every swing instructor out there. And there were some that I really gravitated towards. I thought Bradley Hughes and Kelvin Mirahira had some great stuff.
So smart.
Those things that I was kind of buying into. Then I came across George, like, oh, this guy's kind of laying down the same stuff. And then you kind of go and I come across you and I go, oh, wow, this is some interesting stuff. And it's like, I have selected the people that at the end of the day, I have to make the decision. I think that guy knows what he's talking about. I'm going to do that. He does too. But I had to filter through hundreds of them before I got there. Part. It really is the hard part. And that took discipline in itself. You have to watch some videos that seem kind of maybe boring, but the guy seems pretty smart. He seems to drop a couple nuggets like, oh, what was he saying? But inevitably, it's everyone's job to listen to the content, listen to what people have to say, see how it plays out for you in reality, see if they even do what they say they do. I mean, that's half the battle too. But then you have to make a decision on who you want to trust with your golf game. And that's why I just want to put the information out there and get the people opportunity to say, well, I think Forward Golf's laying it down pretty good. I want to follow kind of what they got. And again, we're just coming from that very innocent place of where does good golf live? I don't think anyone's got it figured out. I kind of like Bryson's approach to it a little bit. He's kind of like, let me figure out what doesn't work. And then I'm just a little bit closer to what does. Yeah. That's kind of my style. But
well, and I think, my whole goal has always been to help make the game a little bit easier. Yeah. Whatever's going to get the ball closer to the hole. Mm-hmm. If you got to chip with a 9-iron, chip with a hybrid, whatever it is, get the ball close to the hole. Yeah. Period. That's it. You don't have to hit these like max spinners or like huge flop shots. Like that comes in time. But learn how to get the ball close to the hole with a variety of clubs, and then get really good with one club.
Let the ego reside in the score and not just that one hero shot that you can't pull off from time to time. I totally agree. Well, hey, dude, this has been an amazing conversation. If I ever do build out the wedge test, I will need a subject to have the variable of themselves conducted. So I'll have to bring it out to you and see what you think of it. And maybe we learn something along the way. Guys, thank you so much. Parker, thank you so much for coming on. I really do appreciate it. Guys, again, that's the Short Game Chef. Check out his site. You'd be doing yourself a disservice if you didn't. And we'll see you guys next time.
Thanks, Chad.
Cool, man. Take it easy.
Money, perfect.